watching a program the other night with a presentation at Glasgow University about 15 years ago with Dr. Martin Hendry. Now, I was actually invited to that presentation, or to give a presentation at the same time, and then I got uninvited. I wonder why. This was December 2010, so we're talking 15 years ago. And he presented his case for the truth of the Apollo landings, and he disparaged everybody who challenged anything because he produced 10 reasons why it must be real, most of which we've actually debated here. The waving flags, remember that one?
Yeah.
He didn't show the Apollo 15 flag. The no stars, he didn't talk about the Apollo 16 ultraviolet photographs. The non-parallel shadows, the slowed film it and then project the film slower so they appear to be moving slower. The hidden crosshairs, the crosshairs that were behind objects on the moon. I mean, this is a professor at a university talking about this. Part 3 is hardly worth looking at. It's only about 2 minutes long because nobody asked him any questions. The dust problems, the radiation, similar backgrounds, that hoary old stupid nonsense, and no jet visible on the takeoff. That's all he came up with. Then he said Apollo was tracked by all these people listening in. Well, where's the recordings of them? And the rocks, of course, proved it. Laser beams were bouncing off the moon. The Chinese confirmed it. Ha! Dear, oh dear. The hammer and feather on Apollo 15. That proves it, of course.
The image of the hammer and feather has nothing to do with the hammer and feather drop showing that they were in a vacuum. The image of the hammer and feather is showing a gigantic gantry strap that's left laying on the ground that they forgot to pick up after they dropped the Apollo 15 LEM. That's sitting there, and of course they also forgot in Apollo 17 they left the big strap that they picked the rover up and handed around on. They just left it on the ground. It's sitting in the photographs, right? Because there's no reason for them to have a strap that can handle 10,000 pounds. Absolutely no reason. And it's the hammer and the feather. I mean, every time I look at that, they're showing the hammer and the feather on the ground in this big strap, and it's half covered in dirt.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't tell whether the strap actually broke or not, or when they were doing the simulation down, I believe one of the legs, when you look at the Apollo 15 landing video, actually touched the edge of that little crater, bounced it around enough, because literally those straps just go in and hook on underneath the top of the legs on the LEM. And if you bounce it, it could just pull out and let the one side drop down, because that's exactly what you see in the video. And they probably dropped about 12 feet.
Yeah, so damage it.
Yeah, snap the legs off, and they just left that strap on the ground.
Thinking nobody would see it.
Well, they took off in the rover. They went twice on the rover without putting the experimental equipment or the flag up. How un-American can you get? It's because they couldn't take the shot around the outside of the LEM. That's why they had to do a stand-up EVA. That's why all of that stuff had to happen. But that hammer and feather, there's this gigantic gantry strap laying on the ground. There's no way any of their equipment needed that. The heaviest piece of equipment they had was the rover, and it had little 1/8-inch aircraft cable hanging down to hold it in place on the side of the LEM. That's the heaviest that they needed. So what is this gigantic strap doing there?
Yeah, it's for moving the module around.
That's right.
Or lowering it onto the surface so they don't get footprints. Anyway, that hammer and feather trick, which everybody gets so excited about, because that must prove they were in low gravity, because you can calculate the gravity they were at. David Percy's demonstrated it in a studio here on Earth in London, dropping a hammer and feather, and they both land at the same time. It's not hard to do if you've got any understanding of studio special effects, which is all that Apollo was. It was a very good demonstration of computer-aided design in those days. There wasn't any officially then, but a lot of things weren't officially around then, so that the story becomes real. If you then start saying that the hammer and feather drop at the same time, therefore they must be on the moon, therefore they're in a vacuum. No. Anybody can drop a hammer and feather and land at the same time if they know what they're doing. It's not rocket science, guys. It's storytelling of the most basic kind. And that's all Apollo ever was. It was a story. It was a brilliantly executed propaganda exercise to demonstrate to the world the superiority of American technology, in that it succeeded beyond anybody's wildest dreams. Because we all still believe it 60 years later. It's sad.
Like Randy said in his presentation with germ warfare, he said people that believe this, and especially the politicians who still believe this, i.e. the presidents, all of them, if they believe it, he said they're insane. He said they're crazy because they should know better and they should look into this. And he says, as far as he's concerned, he says he doesn't believe that one American president from Kennedy on thought that they landed on the moon. Well, Kennedy, he couldn't. He was assassinated. But from Lyndon Johnson on, that's what we're talking about. He says that as far as he's concerned, he says that they never believed it. And he also says that he doesn't believe Trump believes it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Trump and this administration, he just seemed to walk away from it. You know, last time he was in, he pushed for this. He wanted boots on the moon in 2024. What's happening now? Nobody cares anymore.
It's just too difficult to get there, isn't it?
Oh, come on. If they were really there in 1969, there would be bases on there. There would be mining helium-3. They would have no problem going there and back. It would be a piece of cake. You would have daily commutes there.
And we haven't got daily commutes to the moon, have we? No, we got no commutes to the moon. Nobody's been back because nobody went the first time. And anybody who's a rocket scientist will know that, but they don't dare talk about it. We talk about it, and everybody gets very upset because it's one of those great American achievements. We landed men on the moon, they say. Well, prove it. Prove that you did, and do it again. It was so easy the first time.
Well, there's too much traffic at Flagstaff now to do it again.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's a tourist site. Anyway, I just put a few of the images in there for you. The last one I put in, you can see that the ground is where they raked it all because they had to come in and fix this thing up before they could put the flag up. And you can see that it's fully raked everywhere.
Yeah, with a gantry crane strap right next to it.
Yeah, well, like I said, the other picture I put up, that's the cable that the rover was hooked up to. That's all they needed. That's as strong as they needed. That's the heaviest piece of equipment they had. So why is this gigantic gantry strap laying on the ground? You see it's specifically designed and stitched into place so that it loops around. When you pull a gantry strap up like that, it naturally pulls in and it just can hook onto stuff. The same as you pick boats out of the water. We lift them out with cranes all the time and they just simply slip on any kind of a point. And when you let it down and relax it, they're easy enough to trip off. That's the difference in comparison between what they used for the heaviest piece of equipment and then that gigantic strap. There's no way that that thing was already laying on the lunar surface because it looks like it's been there a while before they landed.
And that photograph of Jim Irwin with the flag and the lander and the rover, lovely picture, that one. And that little hill behind him is Mount Hadley Delta.
Yeah, well, how high is that supposed to be?
13,000 feet.
So it's half the height of Mount Everest?
Well, Mount Everest, 29,000, but that's supposed to be about 5 miles away. Why is the texture of the lunar surface, assuming it is, in the front of him, so completely different from what's behind the lander? It makes no sense. And if you use the high definition photograph, you can see it more clearly.
You can actually see it when you zoom in. You can see the Kubrick line.
I think that's rather an insult to the Zeiss lenses on the Hasselblad camera. They're the best lenses around. That's why the Hasselblad camera is such a good camera. It has very good lenses. You'd think to distinguish between the surface texture in a near foreground and the surface texture of the mountain behind Mount Hadley Delta, which should be very similar, but it doesn't. It's washed out. It's completely different. Because it's a front project, doesn't matter what projection it is, you're photographing a screen, and that's the effect you get from photographing a screen. You lose definition.
It almost reminds me of this photo when it comes to Apollo 15, because that is 1 mile across. And take a look at that rover. There's no way that that's a mile across, because you could see every little rock that's down there. And of course, they're going to be larger rocks, but then look at the ones on the hill that are closer. I mean, are you serious?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, you see the grill that they put up at Flagstaff was only 60 feet deep and about 150, 160 feet across. That's exactly what you're looking at. Because if that's a mile across, then you can see 5 miles up, you can see rocks, right? There shouldn't be rocks on that. That's the rill that they created at Flagstaff. There still is apparently some traces of it that can be seen there.
At least they were smart enough to leave the rover and the guy there and the astronaut there, or the person in the astronaut costume there, because now you have something to gauge it by.
Yeah,
and there's
exactly.
no way that that's a mile and a half. Now, we're not talking lengthwise, we're talking widthwise. So, I mean, come on. Forced perspective is one thing, but when you can actually see the rocks on the side of the hill closer to that rover, at least you have something to gauge it by. There's no way that that's no mile and a half. There's no way.
Is approximate for dimensions about the same size as Meteor crater in width across, but it's twice as deep.
Yeah. And Meteor crater is a very good method of demonstrating that, because we know the dimensions precisely.
Right. And like I said, if you were at the restaurant level at the CN Tower sitting there, it's what's that, 1,280 feet, something like that. That's the depth of Hadley Rille.
And check out the window of the CN Tower. You can hardly see people on the street, let alone you can see a few cars moving around, but that's about it.
If you've ever had the privilege of being there, I never went up to the observation deck, which is higher than that. I was only at the restaurant level on the CN Tower. But when you start looking down and you realize that those other buildings are 50 and 60 stories high, when you're sitting there watching commercial aircraft coming in and you have to lean out the window to see the whole plane because it's disappearing underneath you. It's coming that close to the CN Tower when it's coming into the airport, and they're only halfway up the tower.
You just hope they've seen it.
Imagine a commercial aircraft that you have to look down on when it's landing.
And those buildings are really quite small. They're 20 stories high? Hadley Rille is supposed to be that deep. How come you can see so much in it?
I mean, look at the ones of these fellas. They're all hanging on bungees, and they're standing right on the ledge, the highest part of that CN Tower. And now look at the buildings below. Yeah. That's what you should see on Hadley Rille.
Yeah, well, you're not going to see any rocks down there, are you?
No.
Oh, that's right. I don't see any rocks. By the way, I want to ask everybody out there, in this photo that we're showing right now, tell me if you guys can see any rocks. Anyone out there in the audience, if you could see any rocks down there, I don't care how big they are, but can you see any? I don't know. I can't. Can you, Marcus?
No, you can see a few trucks, a few cars, but that's about it. And you only know they're cars if they got a sunroof.
So that would mean that we would be looking for a boulder at least the size of a car. But then again, we can use the cars for the boulders to make a comparison. That doesn't even add up.
I mean, there's some quite big buildings there, aren't they? 20, 30 stories high. That makes them about 300 foot high. I think that one in the center, the white one, you could probably count the number of floors on it, probably 40 or 50 floors. And that's way down below the level of this deck. If that deck is at 1,000 feet or thereabouts, you'd expect the same perspective in Hadley Rille, and you don't get it.
That's about 60 stories.
Okay.
So that's 600 feet, that building with the two antennas on it.
That's right, about 600 feet. That's quite a big building. If people can't see it, it's because they don't want to see it. They want to believe the fairy story of Apollo. They're not prepared to look at the practicality of it and think it through. I mean, those are very good illustrations of that height. And Meteor crater, as you say, is the same reported width as Hadley Rille. But you don't get the same perspective. You don't get the same viewpoint.
I mean, even the smaller towers are 20 stories. Those are the ones that almost look like little small tin cans. That's 20-story buildings you're looking at there.
Yeah, they're quite big, 200 foot high, at least.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting observation. I've noticed very few people in comments under our videos who will challenge what we say about vacuum. They just don't discuss it. It's as if they don't know what they're talking about. They just accept what NASA tells them. We've introduced various questions. That's all we do. We introduce questions, subjects which can be examined scientifically. But nobody talks about vacuum. Nobody in the comments talk about vacuum. It's as if they want to ignore it because they know that it's a reasonable subject to challenge Apollo about. The cold welding, the outgassing, the standard scientific results from vacuum testing. But nobody comes, except for Bill Demos, who did come along and say, yeah, you're right, the vacuum will have an effect. I know, it's my job to know. He's one of the very few people who've even acknowledged what we say about vacuum. And when you talk about the effect on photographic film, which you've demonstrated very carefully, how the color balance of the film is affected by a vacuum.
Oh, that was interesting because his friend put a different type of film in the vacuum chamber with the one I sent him, with the Ektachrome I sent him. And it was color film, but that one fogged more because he did some pictures of lemon trees, but then he also did a few pictures of some posters indoors. Oh my God, that one has a haze all over it. 3 of those photos that he did take, or his friend took, have haze on them.
Like I said, I don't believe there's any random photographs in there. A lot of them, people look at them and they say they're boring photographs, but they're actually not, because those astronauts are showing you the fraud. They take a picture of it. Whether you can see it in the picture or not, whether the picture turned out clear enough to see it, they're photographing stuff on the lunar surface that shouldn't be there all the time. Anybody that believes that they landed on the moon, it's really simple. All you have to do is explain it from launch to splashdown and show that every piece of equipment worked flawlessly during that entire thing. There can't be an error anyway. Not even the smallest amount can go wrong, because otherwise it didn't happen. And that goes right from the fuel numbers, the amount of fuel that they had on board, right on through the landing, the takeoff. Why they don't have any coordination on lifting off the lunar surface is absolutely impossible. How they didn't talk to the people in the command module as it's orbiting. That is one of the largest errors out there in the transcript. 3 people on a journey, you just don't talk to one of the persons for 3 days straight. Because if they're not there, if they don't check in every couple of hours in that rotation, if they don't check in with them, there's going to be a problem. If they can't communicate, there's going to be like, what are these guys on the lunar surface going to do? They're dead. If that orbiter isn't up there, they're dead. And the guy that's orbiting up there, if he doesn't hear anything on the ground, why would he stick around? He would have to assume, if he can't communicate with them, that they're no longer alive. And there's going to be a lot of communications about what would happen in those events. But for 3 days, Apollo 15, 16, and 17, no communication with the command module from the lunar surface. And if they try and claim, oh, there's, a private chat line for them between there and Houston and all of that stuff, right? This is bullshit. Because Houston would be relaying any information from that, if it's a private line, back to the guys on the ground.
Of course they would. You've got to coordinate the takeoff from the surface with the speed and position of the orbiting command module. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. And the command module is moving 3 times faster than a high-powered bullet. So you've got to get it right. And if you don't get it right, you haven't got your ride home, especially if they haven't installed the drogue properly.
Let's say they did that they did all the calculations, that they have all that data to get it right. They're taking off from the lunar surface. They don't know exactly how much they weigh because they don't know how much the samples they're bringing back weighs. That's number 1. Number 2, these rocket engines were hand-built, and they're giving an estimate on what the actual thrust is. Well, what if it's a little bit less by a few hundred pounds? They're not going to take off as fast. They're not going to reach the same height at the same time.
Yeah, well, there's another problem too that Randy was talking about in his interview with Germ Warfare. Those 2 guys were talking about the fact that if they had their suits on, they most likely did when they took off from the surface, they're still standing beside that engine. This is something that those 2 were talking about that I never thought of before.
Well, there's an atmosphere in there. The sound is going to transfer off of the lid that's over top of that engine into that spacecraft. Is going to be incredibly loud.
Wouldn't the vibration still vibrate?
The whole floor is going to vibrate.
Okay, if the whole floor is going to vibrate, then it's going to go through their boots and it's going to go up through the suit that has an atmosphere in it and into the microphone.
So you're going to hear it.
Well, they were able to turn a cassette on and go off into the wild blue yonder.
Yeah.
Good liftoff, automatic. Stable about 306.
Then there had to be an atmosphere inside of that craft, because how could they hear that if they just put it on, no atmospheres in there, and yet there's an atmosphere in the suit? So obviously the vibrations from the speaker and the cassette recorder are going through the suit.
They repressurized before they took off, so there's an atmosphere in there.
Yeah, there is.
Oh my God, then you'd hear it.
Exactly. If you can hear that cassette tape, you can hear that engine.
And also you're going to get very hot. Those engines produce a lot of heat, whether they're hypergolic or not. Any rocket engine produces heat. So where's the heat going to go? Into the atmosphere. It's going to be about 200 degrees Fahrenheit by the time they finish.
And not only that, the volume of that rocket engine inside of there is going to drown out whatever the cassette tape is doing. They wouldn't even be able to yell and hear each other. It didn't have any extra insulation for that. That was just a cap over top of the engine. I mean, you can't get near those things. It's a small engine. You take a look at even any of the ground testing they do on those things. Those things are loud.
It's 3,500 pounds of thrust the Ascent stage engine produced. That's quite a lot.
Hand built. And everybody has to understand each one was hand built and had never been fired before.
Yeah.
So they don't know exactly how many 1,000 pounds of thrust because they're hand built. One could be a little bit more thrust and another one could be a little bit less. Any one of those variables will determine how fast they get up to rendezvous, isn't it?
And if they don't rendezvous, they haven't got a ride home. They're going to orbit the moon.
Exactly. The other thing people need to understand, the Ascent stage was not gimbaled. It's full throttle as soon as you do it. They just use the explosive charges to crack the fuel open. It's hypergolic fuel. It mixes together and burns. So those temps empty, and then that's it. It's shut off. It burns 100% of the fuel. If they got up there too early, they can't shut the engines off. It's going to continue to burn as well, right? There's no control on those engines whatsoever.
The only control they might have had is on the reaction control thrusters.
That's how they so-called guided it into orbit using the retro rockets. But the engine itself, you just turn it on and you're gone.
Yeah, until the fuel's gone and then you stop.
That's right.
You just hope you're in the right orbit, the right altitude, and the right speed.
So the calculations have to be extremely accurate because they don't have control of the engine.
So that's all fake.
Absolutely. There's nobody in their right mind would design anything like that. Oh, just turn it on, and when you run out of fuel, that's the right spot to be in.
Oh dear. And they expect us to believe all this stuff, you know. It's only when you examine it and you ask the questions, you come to the conclusion that no, there was no reality there at all. It was all fiction, fraud, fabrication. That's all it was, just to demonstrate that humans had been to the moon. Well, big deal. What effect did that have? They never went back, never done anything with it since. It was all a political event.
You know, when you said that Apollo is a cult, so here we are on the 50th anniversary of Apollo, and they've turned the Washington Monument into a screen that is casting Apollo films on it. Then all of a sudden you see all this Egyptian hieroglyphics on it, and then they switch back to Apollo, and then you see more hieroglyphics in a different format going up and down on that Washington Monument. Yep. And the people are sitting there and their eyes, they're mesmerized. They're just hypnotized by all of this. And there's chat going on and people have their kids up on their shoulders and they're all happy and they're all glowing. And the way the camera's going through the audience, picking out specific individuals that are completely hypnotized. Really, that's what a cult does to people. You're literally hypnotized to a point where you're not thinking anymore. They're not even realizing what's up there on that obelisk.
That's right. So what they were trying to do is reproduce the same images they had when Apollo 11 took off, when they're going through the crowds of the people and stuff like that with the kids on their shoulder and the whole nine yards. They just replicated that same event over again.
Yeah, but they purposely go through the crowds with those cameras, purposely picking out people who are mesmerized. You
Yep.
see them, oh,
That's what a cult does to people. You've got to believe it, because if you don't believe it, you're a heretic.
yeah, look at the flat earth. I mean, all those guys that left at the flat earth, I mean, they're being hit. They're disparaging comments being thrown at them by their cult leaders.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a very toxic environment. But then again, when you look at this, isn't it sort of the same when it comes to the people that are literally being hypnotized by this stuff?
It's exactly the same. That's what cults do to people. They remove their objective thinking. And you have to agree with the holy relics and the charismatic leaders and the holy scriptures. There's a lot of holy scriptures with Apollo, and you've got to believe it. And if you don't believe it, you're a heretic, you're cast out, and nobody's going to listen to you anymore.
A lot of people that you don't think can be sucked into that kind of stuff are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I should know. Go.
Yeah. And that's how they look at us. How can you do that? Well, if you do the research, if you take their word at carte blanche and you don't do the research, but
Yeah.
if you see that there's a problem and you research it and it makes sense, and then you take a look at the history of this particular subject, where we're not going anywhere near the moon. I mean, today's technology with fully autonomous systems out there, if you want to land something on the lunar surface, you should be able to do it. The computers are small enough. They've got sensors everywhere on them. They should be able to autonomously get there, orbit, descend, and land, and not just fall over, right? Because it happened without any of that equipment, without any of those sensors, without anything. And if they claim that they were operating them by joystick remotely out there, well, that wasn't happening either. That's just absolute nonsense, because as soon as it orbits, let's say that you believe it all the way up till it gets to the moon, that they were manually operating these things. As soon as it goes into orbit and is behind the moon, you've lost the signal. You have no idea what this thing is going to do. And then you got to be able to try and track it when it comes around the other side, when it shows up. Are you going to be locked onto it or not with your digital radio signals at 2.2 gigahertz? Then they would have to account for the delay. There's just multiple factors that you look at just when you're communicating like that. Today, yeah, we've got the equipment to do it. We've got the technology to do it. The machines are autonomous. They should be able to handle it, but it's still not happening. And that's unmanned. The weight penalty to keep a human in space, to keep them alive, to give them all the necessary things that they need. I mean, just to block the radiation alone, the weight penalty there alone is just far too much. You can't even lift it.
That's why they haven't been back, because they can't provide the protection.
Well, they haven't been.
I know they haven't been.
Yeah, so
they couldn't provide the protection.
It's so easy to say haven't been back, or they just haven't been.
No. So returning to the moon means the first time to get to the moon, because they haven't been in the first place. It was all fiction.
However, if they make it look real enough for people, the people that believe it, it's because when they look at it, they have been to the moon in their personal imagination.
Yep. Good point. Yep.
Because if you make it real enough for them, that's like the British Interplanetary Society, imagination to reality. If we tell you the story well enough, you believe it, and your imagination fills in the blanks. And that then becomes a fact. If we put it in writing, like anything on this planet, if you put it in writing, it becomes a fact.
Yep.
If you have photographic evidence, it becomes a fact. But they're good enough that they can tell you a story and you believe it as a fact. And that's why the documentaries that Neil deGrasse Tyson and everything else do, that's how they introduce you to space. And what's in their imagination, they're telling you that these are facts. So when they're describing things in space, they truly don't know. And today's sensors that are out there looking at things in space go through a computer, and it's the guy that wrote the software to analyze what the image that they're getting back from their sensors are. The computer's converting into something that we so-called can understand, or what they want us to believe.
That's why you're always told when you go to a cinema to see a film, you have to suspend your disbelief, because otherwise it doesn't work. And if you suspend your disbelief about Apollo, because you believe what you're seeing, you're fooling yourself.
But there's a lot of people that are questioning this because they can't get back. NASA cannot get back. They can't even get back sending people into lunar orbit. And by the way, where is this gateway station, this lunar gateway station? Oh, they have 4 modules completed. Now they have 1 more to go. And then they have to get it there, module by module, which means that they're going to need 5 rocket flights up there. And that's not including the ones that they're going to have to send up there with a team to assemble the thing. What about the fact, again, it's not in an environment. There's no protection around the moon. There's no Van Allen belts. There's no atmosphere. So those poor guys working outside could get clobbered by micrometeorites.
And radiation.
I'll make a prediction that the records today on space travel will be found 50 years from now at an abandoned Hooters, not a McDonald's.
Yes. Yeah, Hooters is not doing very well at the moment financially, is it? I wonder why.
Well, maybe they've outgrown themselves.
That's possible.
Anyway, that's my prediction. The records of space will be found 50 years from now at an abandoned Hooters. Hooters.